Eliminating debt, how we handle that, some of the cash flow issues, that sort of thing. And we're going to take a look at this from kind of two perspectives, not only the financial side of things, but also the emotional side of things, which really tends to drive the financial side. So, although money may not be able to buy happiness, it is an important part of life. And so we want to talk about, as we start to look at this, it is important to start to balance these two. The emotional side, what really does bring happiness. A lot of people will use the spending to fill voids that, that they have. The wants versus the needs. On the surface, this sounds pretty simple. As we start spending and we look at what we're spending our money on, what do we need versus what do we want? And people tend to think in terms of groceries and housing and that type of thing as the needs. And then they kind of look at the wants as other things. But what is interesting is when I sit down and I talk with people and we look at what's going on, we find out that line becomes very blurred for people. I'll give you a perfect example. I had this happen. This was a few months ago. I was meeting with a family, husband and wife, and they had 4 vehicles, 3 of which had car payments on them. And so when we start going through that, and I start looking at the family structure, we had 1 in college, we had 2 younger ones that did not drive, and then we had the husband and wife. So we've got 4 vehicles and 3 car payments. And so I asked them, I said, well, why do we have 3 car payments? They're tight every month. Why do we have 3 car payments? We have 3 drivers and 4 vehicles. And they said, well, that 4th vehicle, it does okay. Yes, we drive it regularly, but it, he goes to school. It's about an hour and a half ways down to IU, and we don't feel like it's as reliable as we'd like it to be. And so their choice was they took on another car payment. As we went through that, I said, for $300 to $400 a month, you've got a vehicle sitting there that you said is okay. It might not be as reliable as you'd like it to be, but for $300, $400 a month, in a couple months, it could be as reliable as you want it to be. And now you don't have this obligation over time. So they made a decision on what they claimed was a need, when in fact it really was a want. And so that line, when we look at our own stuff, it tends to get very blurred. We buy because of emotion, not logic. This one can be illustrated in all kinds of different ways. Think about the last time you went into a car dealership and you bought a vehicle, and you go in there, especially if you're talking about a new car, you go in there and you look on the showroom floor and you see this nice shiny vehicle, and you might have even gone in with a budget and you said, you know what, I'm not going to spend more than this, or my car payment's not going to exceed this. But then you get in there and you find out, oops, I haven't been in the car dealership in a while, and they're a little more expensive than I expected. And then you open that door and you stick your head in and you go, oh man, that thing smells good. This is a new car smell. And you sit down in it and you're in the driver's seat and oh, this is nice. And some of them have screens in them now. And so people make that decision. They buy that new car. And it's a little more than they wanted to spend. But, then they move through time. And all of a sudden, what we see is when we purchase that item, we believe it'll make us happy. And it did in that moment. And then that item loses its value over time. And so what tends to happen is that first payment comes due. And when we go to write that check, all of a sudden, I don't smell that new car smell anymore. And that seat's not as much fun to sit in as it once was when I first bought it. And so now that emotional high that I was on I'm losing it a little bit. And so then you see, we tend to look for the next item to make us happy. Now, you're probably not going to replace the car, but what do people do? They'll tend to go shopping for clothes. And we see this type of thing. You go out and you buy some new clothes, and then, a couple months later, it's more new clothes. And, every season that comes around, we're constantly replacing clothes, whether they're worn out or not. So People run into this all the time where they're looking for that next thing to fill that emotional void. So, changing your perspective, that's what we want to take a look at this evening, is how do we start to view this in a little bit different way? How do we start to handle those things and recognize that when we purchase those items, while they may be wonderful in the moment, long term, that's not really going to carry us through. And then if we've got all this debt surrounding it, that happiness that it brought us is not going to be happiness when we're paying those bills. You shouldn't live in fear of your finances. Your financial dealings are serious, however, you are in control even if it doesn't always feel like it. I had a situation here, this was just a few weeks ago. I met with a husband and wife back, this was really at the beginning of the summer, and this kind of carried through. And when I met with them, the husband had a decent income, and the wife was working part-time. She was in school, working part-time. She was going to become a teacher. Over the course of the summer, he received a $10,000 raise, and she went full-time, received about a $20,000 raise. So as a household, there was a new $30,000 brought into this household. So as we started looking at this, we started discussing, what are we going to do with this extra $30,000? Are we going to save it? What are we going to do with that? And so literally just a couple weeks ago, he says to me, he says, I don't know that we want to get serious about saving it yet because we're looking at buying a new house. Now, they currently live in a home that's worth about $150,000, and there's no kids. It's just the two of them. So there's not a great need for a bigger house. They don't have any plans for kids. She's not pregnant. There's none of that. But they're interested in a bigger house because they've got new money. And then he says, but also she's really enjoying going out to eat more. And so when it was all said and done, the decision they made was, we're not going to save any of it right now. But they are going to buy a bigger home, and they are going to eat out a lot more. And they're basically going to blow $30,000 additional every year. And so, when we look at that situation, if you think about this, if they've got a $150,000 home they live in now, let's just pretend they're going to jump to a $250,000 home. I don't know what they're going to jump to. They haven't found that home yet, but that's probably what they're looking at. So they jump by $100,000. Now, if we took, of that whole $30,000 raise, if we had taken $10,000 of that and said, we're going to set that aside to make an additional house payment. Well, if you take $10,000, you divide that by 12. That's $833 a month. Every month. Now, $833 a month will buy $100,000 of home. So here's my point. They had a $30,000 raise in the last few months. They could take $10,000 of that, set it aside for the home, and go from $150,000 to a $250,000 home. If they would agree to take the other $20,000 and save it, let's just pretend they park it in the bank for 5 years. That's $100,000. That additional $100,000 they spent on that home, they could cut a check to the bank at that point and only owe $150,000, and all $30,000 of that would be back in their world again. But instead, they're going to enjoy eating out, and they might gain weight, and they might have physical problems and health issues, and now they're going to need more money. And so the point is, your financial dealings, where it says you are in control even if it doesn't always feel like it, they're going to put themselves in a position where in the next few years, they're probably going to say, I don't know what happened. You made a decision right here that changed that. You can control your savings expenses and even your earnings, however you have to adopt the mindset to do so. So when we talk about that and we talk about this ability to have control, most people don't get an instant $30,000 raise. That doesn't happen for most people. But we have decisions we can make along the way. When we talk about those needs and wants, most people at this point are carrying these devices here. I have a family of 4. I have 4 of these devices. Now, is this a want or a need? It's obviously a want. But when you have two teenage kids and all their friends have them, all of a sudden it kind of seems like a need. The point is, if we couldn't afford them, I can control that. I could turn those off tomorrow and make that go away. So there's almost always things we can do to impact what's going on in our financial world to change those kind of things. So what makes you happy? It's often been said that the best things in life are free, and it's true. And so, again, it's starting to change that mindset, this idea that we have to buy and keep replacing. We tend to refer to it as lifestyle addiction. And when you think about an addiction, think about what happens there. Now, when we think about addictions, we're typically thinking in terms of like drugs or, those types of things. It could be alcohol or cigarettes or whatever the case may be. And when you first take whatever that item is, it only takes just a little bit of it for you to experience that high or whatever that sensation is you get from that item that you take. But over time, it doesn't take just that little bit. It takes a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And we run into that same thing when we talk about lifestyle and lifestyle addiction. Why is it that all of a sudden, when cell phones came out, those average monthly bills were very, very low. Now, a family of 4, you're well over $200 to have 4 of those. It's lifestyle addiction. We all run into it. You have to be willing to sacrifice to achieve goals. Let me go back to that family I was talking about with that $30,000. All they have to do is make a conscious decision that they're not going to eat out and just blow 20 grand a year that they didn't have a couple months ago. This is all new money. And they could pay their house back down to what they've always been in 5 years. These are, when we talk about starting to save and hold back, we're not talking about saving so we never spend. We're just talking about delayed spending. It's that ability to say, I'm not going to spend today, so sometime down the road, I have the ability to buy what I need, what I want, travel more, whatever the case may be. Take control of your circumstances. Before setting out to achieve a goal, look how others have achieved something similar and find out how they did it. It's so interesting to me when you look around, you'll see people talking about different business strategies or investment strategies or whatever the case may be. And inevitably, they're talking to their coworkers who haven't saved, haven't invested, haven't done anything. They're not talking to the guy who owns the business, who might be making 3 or 4 times what they're making. They're talking to people in their same area. And so if we can start to shift our mindset a little bit and start to look at how do people get to where they're going? Well, let's go talk to those people. If I'm here and I want to be here, then I better talk to people that are over here, not people that are over here giving me bad advice on what's going on. Find someone who's on the path you want to pursue and have a conversation with them. Again, it's just that idea. Who are we following? Who are we tracking after? Following a well-defined path often makes it easier to bring about change. This idea of creating accountability for yourself. If you start to set certain goals, certain markers in place, it's much easier to achieve those. And it gives you the ability to track, am I moving the right direction or am I all of a sudden off somewhere else? You need to be able to walk before you can run. Taking small steps, if you're contemplating significant changes, can dramatically improve your chances for success. When we want to go from point A to point B, sometimes that can be a huge jump. So we have to take it in small pieces. If we're talking about wiping out debt, we don't try to take it all out in one lump sum. We take out one little credit card at a time and take it in pieces. Evaluate the current situation. Initial spending assessment. This one is huge. Most people have not taken the time to work through where are they actually spending and sending their money and what's going on, and do I know where every dollar is, and is it accounted for, and are those dollars used in a manner that makes sense? And so when you go through this initial spending assessment, it's pretty eye-opening. Most people are generally shocked at how much they're spending on, fast food or, whatever it may be. Identifying the wants and the needs. We kind of talked about that. And I really recommend on that step there, get a third party. Get someone that's not emotionally attached to those decisions to help you look at them and decide, is that, we got a big storm rolling through. Is that really a want or is it a need? And often a third party can sit there and help you identify, you know what? You don't need 3 car payments when you have 4 cars and 3 drivers. Discussing options and adjusting spending accordingly. That's something that has to happen within the household. I can't tell you how many times the family with the 4 cars that I've mentioned more than once, the wife was in tears in this discussion. The husband absolutely didn't agree. That's something they've got to come to terms with. It's just hopefully someone else can help them identify some of those issues so they can look at that. Tracking spending, creating a comprehensive budget. This one is crucial. Has anyone heard of Mint.com? You're familiar with Mint.com? Have you logged into it? Looked at it?
No, but I do know about it.
It's a good website. It's well worth checking out. What it will do is you can link up your different accounts, bank accounts, credit cards, virtually anything you have online access to, you can link up to it. I don't have any connection with Mint.com, so other than to share with you, there's a free site out there. But it is a nice tool that will help you understand where is every dollar going, and then not only that, but it will show you the national average. What do people on a month typically spend at Kohl's, McDonald's, whatever it is, And now you can start to see how am I tracking in that. The other thing that's nice that it'll do is it'll say you had abnormal spending on whatever that topic was. And so now you can look back and say, oh, what happened here? Why am I not tracking the way I normally do? You can put limits in there and say, hey, I only want to spend this much this month on fast food or whatever. Well, you're at the 15th of the month and you've hit that. It'll send you an alert. So that's a wonderful tool for that. It's a free service, so I highly recommend using it. Establishing and implementing short and long-term goals. Again, we talked about that just a little bit, but start to find those things that you can attack and make happen quickly. And then also those longer-term goals. Where do I want to be in 5 years or 10 years or, whatever the case may be. Reviewing and modifying your plan when necessary. Things change. Things always change. It's important to be able to have the flexibility to adjust accordingly. For me, I have a daughter that will be starting college next year, I guess it is. She's a senior this year. So things change. I'll have one less person in the house, but I'll have one in college. So it's always important to be able to adjust accordingly. Build an emergency fund. Set aside at least 3 to 6 months worth of expenses to help cope with life's emergencies. So when we talk about this, you can see when you talk to people who have no money in the bank, I mean, the littlest thing comes along. They lose a set of tires, the transmission goes out, the furnace dies. You can see the panic set in. If we make this a priority, just decide we're going to set aside some little amount of money every month. If we don't have it, we're probably not in a position where we can set aside a bunch of money. So we set aside a little bit every month into some account that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We're not going to touch it until it's truly an emergency. And that creates a lot of freedom for us. You know, when that comes along, we're not at the mercy of Visa and MasterCard or some personal loan or a payday loan or, you know, whatever the case may be. Become a financial guru. So what are they talking about here? They're not suggesting that you go out and try to research and understand everything. But what they are saying is talk to people, talk to experts, understand what your options are. I talk to people all the time that say, why didn't someone ever share this with me before? Well, did you ever tell anybody you're having issues? Did you share with them that you've got a problem in this area and you need some help? Talk to people. Whatever those issues are, you would be surprised what some of the different solutions can be out there. This is showing the interest that would accrue, what we would pay on a credit card with a certain balance. And this is pretty interesting when people look at this. We see this all the time. Americans carry huge credit card debts. This is looking at $14,000 in credit card debt. And if your credit card had an 18% interest rate, over the course of that time, if you're paying the minimum payment, you'll pay $24,000 in interest. Not the whole thing, just the interest. That means you pay $38,000 total. So for $14,000, we pay $38,000 total. And then on 29.99, and I have seen people's cards be this high, it'd be $34,000 or about $48,000 total that we would spend. I can't tell you how many times I've had people tell me, well, I've been paying the minimum payments, but the balance doesn't seem to move. That's why. Getting out of debt. Now, there's a number of ways to discuss getting out of debt. These are kind of three major categories, but that's not to say this is the only way to go about it. But this really covers a broad spectrum here. The first one, the debt snowball. Has anybody ever heard of Dave Ramsey? We've got one that's heard of Dave Ramsey. So Dave Ramsey, he's on the radio quite a bit. He's traveled around the country. He's written books. He's done all kinds of things. And to my knowledge, he was kind of the inventor of the debt snowball. And so the idea of the debt snowball is when you look at your debts, you've got all these credit cards and car payments and lines of credit and whatever the case may be. And what most people do is they'll look at that credit card and they'll say, it's a minimum payment of $25, I'm going to pay $40. And this one's $50, I'm going to pay $60. And they round every one of them up just a little bit. And so the idea is they think they'll throw a little at each one and they'll pay them all down quicker. Well, what the debt snowball says is, let's grab up all that extra money. Maybe it's $100 a month, $200, maybe it's $10, who knows, whatever that number is. And we're going to identify out of all those debts the worst one. And when we gather up all that money, we're going to pick that worst one and we're going to take it out. So instead of kind of this shotgun approach, we're going to rifle it and take it out. Then once we take that one out, we've got not only the payment on that debt that's freed up, but all those extra payments, and we take it to the next one. And then we just work right down the list. And so that's kind of the debt snowball. And if you don't have any idea how to work that out, that's something we can certainly help you understand. Line up all your debts, which one's the worst, how do I identify that, and work through that. Modified snowball. So when we talk about a modified snowball, we're typically talking about the same basic design, but depending on what's going on, we might take a portion of those debts and go to the bank and maybe we've got a bunch of credit cards that are between 20 and 30% of interest. And so we take 3 or 4 or 5 of those credit cards. Maybe we go to the bank and we get an unsecured loan that's only at 10%. And so we've cut the interest rate down substantially. And now it's one of the debts that goes into our snowball along with the other debts. But we've lowered the overall interest. We've probably even lowered the necessary payment on it. Depends on the structure. So there's a number of things that can happen there. So the point we can start to look at some creative tools to speed this up even more. Credit counseling. Credit counseling really comes in two forms. One is you can work with a person who actually can go out there, look at your credit report, and start to challenge different things on it and say, hold on, that's not reported correctly, and that's lowering their credit score. And they can get those things pulled off of there. And so your credit score can start to come up. And not everything can come off, but they can have some pretty good success in helping bring that back up. And then when they do that, what happens? Well, you qualify for better interest rates. Your car insurance rates tend to drop. So it tends to save a lot of money to get that credit score up. The other area that when we talk in terms of credit counseling, there are companies out there, and I've run into this with clients. They've got all these debts out there, and no matter how creative we get, they're kind of backed into a corner. There's not a lot we can do with it. Well, there are companies we can find that they can go to, and those companies will have agreements set up with MasterCard and Visa and Capital One and whoever all these people are. And their agreements will automatically drop the interest rates. So maybe instead of being at 20%, you're at 6%. Instead of at 25, you're at 12 or whatever it is. And so what happens is you'll pay that company one monthly payment. So instead of making all these individual payments to all these different companies, you make one lump sum payment, then they will make all those individual payments. Now you'll pay that company a fee to do that, but when you do that, the interest rates are much lower, and you'll typically pay things off much faster. So that's another tool that can be used to help make that happen. Life on a debt management program, that's kind of what we're talking about. So debt management program participants typically enjoy one convenient monthly payment. Again, you send in, if the total of all those debts is $1,000 a month, you send $1,000 a month into that company, they cover sending it out to everyone else, but the lower interest rate speeds it up quite a bit. Lower monthly payments, that may or may not happen. Sometimes you'll get a lower monthly payment. Sometimes that payment's identical. Doesn't really matter. The key is you're going to speed up how quickly you pay it off. Reduced interest rates. That's almost always the issue. The rates typically are considerably lower. Elimination of late and or over limit fees. That can be huge. Once people cross those limits on their credit cards, not only is it the interest rate, then there's some additional fees on top of it. They struggle to ever come out of that. Ongoing education, access to credit counselors. So now you have someone that you can actually talk to that can help you through those things. And then full support of customer care associates. So that is another tool that can be